Hello everyone, this is episode 4 of your favorite Take Care podcast. You are here with Morten and Sangha, and we have two really clever and intelligent guests with us today.
We do. Welcome Sue, welcome Jane. It's a privilege to have the both of you on here. If we start with you, Sue, I'd like to know who the idea person is really behind Thoughts Become Things. Tell us some more about yourself.
Okay, so I'm Sue Jones of Thoughts Become Things, and I primarily help home care businesses attract private clients and attract great employees to their business. And technology is certainly a part of that, and I am a big advocate in technology to provide solutions, not only for the care businesses, but really to how to enhance the lives of the people they support as well.
Brilliant. You've definitely been on that pitch course, selling your stuff really well there. Jane, over to you. Can you tell us a bit more about who you are and what work you're doing now?
So I'm Jane Townson, Chief Executive of the Home Care Association. We represent and support organisations that are involved in enabling people to live well at home and flourish in their communities. We have two main strands to our work: providing practical support and tools to help home care providers, and secondly, to represent their interests with external stakeholders, so local government, central government, regulators, the media, the public, working closely with our other partners in the sector, so the Care Home Gang, Care England and National Care Forum, National Care Association, the mental health provider representatives and disabilities groups and Shared Lives Plus. So everybody really, local care associations, everybody that's involved really in one way or another with provision of services. And our members altogether, they've sort of got 5 themes that are of strategic importance to them. You won't be surprised to hear that workforce is right up there, closely linked to financial sustainability, and that's both in the state-funded and the private pay market. Quality, innovation and best practice, so that's where a lot of our thinking around digital comes in. Regulation in all of its forms, so employment, care regulations and so on, and then public awareness and public understanding. So we tend to organise our work around those 5 themes.
And as you just pinpointed, you're currently, I imagine, using a lot of your time in that first bracket that's called workforce. What's the current state of affairs?
Yeah, so we've actually got the highest vacancy rates in home care in recorded history at the moment, 13.5%. But some of that is because demand has risen. So we've actually been delivering 15 to 16% more hours than we were a year ago. Demand in the community is rising. I think that's a combination of demographic pressures, but also the aftermath of the pandemic, when many people didn't seek help with their health and care needs and when they could have done, and so have deteriorated. People are waiting for operations, they're waiting for clinics. So the Association of Directors of Adult Social Services released a report a week ago, and just over a week ago, showing that unmet need is the highest that they can remember. There's over 500,000 people waiting for assessments at the moment. And of course, inadequate capacity in home care and other community-based services has an impact on the NHS too, because they rely on being able to discharge people from hospital back home in a timely manner. And if they can't do that, the beds are obviously then occupied in the hospital, which means that they can't admit new people. And that has a knock-on effect on ambulance wait times, for example, because the ambulances can't unload people at the hospital. They're waiting, and then that means that they're not available to go and deal with emergencies. So it is quite a difficult situation at the moment. And then, the other part of a lot of our time at the moment is being spent on the fair cost of care and the funding side of things, which we can come back to. But the funding and the workforce are very closely linked, and you can't really look at one without the other.
And in both these, how are you seeing technology playing a different role than what it played before COVID?
So I think technology in general, I tend to think of it in three categories. So there are technology solutions to support citizens, technology solutions to support care workers and informal carers, and technology solutions to support care providers. And some of them are the same and some of them are different. So I think there is huge opportunity to combine all of those different technology solutions. I think one of the things we tend to do is get quite focused on digital solutions, and sure, they are really important, but I'm also really interested in some of the equipment that can be used and is being developed to be used to enable people to live well at home. So, for example, some of the robotic tools that, there are some equipment that allows you to help someone get out of bed, into a chair, across the room and into the sofa or into the shower. There are also robots now being developed to cook meals, to fold your laundry for you, there already exist to vacuum your carpets automatically. So I think when we're facing a future of a doubling of demand, we're not coping now. We would need double the number of care workers to meet the demands for when I'm in my 80s. I don't think that's very likely to happen. So I think we're going to need to find other solutions, and helping people to be more connected within their communities, creating networks of caring, if you like, using some of these solutions and making the most of the care workers that we do have. I am optimistic in the sense that I think some other business sectors, such as hospitality, retail, warehouses and those kind of things, they will experience robotic technology sooner. So Amazon warehouses, for example, probably will end up having lots of robots doing all the picking and putting in boxes. And I even saw a video on Twitter the other day of a robot actually delivering parcels. So the back of the van opens and out slides this robot and lifts the parcel and leaves it on the doorstep. And so all of the people that work in those kind of industries will be looking for work, and we can probably offer them work in our sector, which is very people orientated. So ever the optimist, I'm hoping that things will improve in the longer run.
I completely agree with what you said there, Jane. The commodity work is going to be taken by machines, and that will free us more to remain human and be part of the sector that we are, to care more, because that's never going to be replaced by machines, by robots and things like that. I want to bring you in here, Sue. You work with a lot of providers. What do you see? How has been, technology engagement in the provider's mindset, given that, they are sitting at a very crucial position where they are supporting the people they look after, but also the workforce.
And for me, certainly with the care providers I speak to, is I think it's getting that they need to get on the wavelength as to how technology can actually enable them to run their business and not see it as a threat. Is seeing it as a business opportunity. And I agree absolutely, Jane. I did some research a couple of years ago on robots and coming into the care sector, and absolutely, I can definitely anticipate that I will have a robot in my house within the next 20 years. And of course, if it's going to help me around the house, then absolutely. But my concern is that the care providers out there at the moment are just not there in terms of the implementation. This is, no matter what, this is a huge change management process. I work with a company called Astroline, who actually provide the assistive technology, some of the assistive technology that, I help care businesses implement. And even that is, it's getting them to see the why, why you would do that. And Morten, that I have spoken about Maslow's hierarchy of needs as to how you actually help care businesses to understand the why. So that's why I take them through that Maslow's hierarchy of needs to really assess where does this fit in within the process, and where does it fit in with the client process, where does it fit in with the employee process, and where does it sit in within the care business process. And looking at the CLOEs, CQC CLOEs, you can still use the Maslow's hierarchy of needs to assess where technology is actually going to fit in with there. So those are the key things, because I think that we really need to help them bridge the gap that is currently there to enable them to implement technology successfully for them.
You know what I liked when you mentioned what you were working with? The first thing that Jane did was to make a note of it. You're always hungry for new knowledge, Jane. That's beautiful. Sue, how's the general reception then when you introduce this kind of thinking?
I've had 2 businesses sign up for the assistive technology, and that's working well with them. But there are others that are struggling with that concept. Even so, it's the things that people don't understand, especially when you're in the private paying market, is how do they actually sell it? How do they wrap it into a service and market it in a way that people will want to buy? Because again, that's a bridging the gap, a need that is they don't know how to do at the moment. So it's helping them through that and making sure that they can do it effectively. Because for me, of course, when you've got a parent on their own, then you actually would like, from my perspective, from a daughter or a son's perspective, I want mum or dad to feel safe at home. But from the mum or dad's perspective, they don't sometimes see it like that. They see it as being, they don't want somebody interfering with their day-to-day or their perceived thought process that somebody's actually monitoring them, and that's not really as it is. So there's barriers there that we need to get over, be aware of, so we can get over them.
Which brings me to the point of education in the sector. And how do we educate the sector about technology, about going digital? But the perception that I often get is you are trying to bring in technology for the sake of technology. We are bringing digital. We want the sector to go digital, and it's often a debate that I have to participate in, saying that digital is nothing but culture change. So, are you seeing more readiness with regards to the culture change, Jane? With the providers that are your members, or and all other forums that. So I think you participate in.
I think it's important to understand that there are differences between the private pay part of the market and the state-funded part of the market for a start. And at least in principle, in the private pay part of the market, you have more freedom to decide how you're going to run your services. And the issue there is more what Sue said, that providers are struggling to understand how to create a return on investment as they see it. And I think the answer there really is to encourage everyone to see that you can use technology in what we might describe as pre-care stage. So before people have even got to the point that they need personal care or anything, it's at that stage where you're just a little bit worried about your loved one. Are they able to walk off to the shops themselves without getting lost, or are they seeing their friends, but you may not live close enough to pop in every day? And then, of course, if you can encourage people to adopt the technology, what you're selling is peace of mind, not technology. So I think it's a mistake to focus on the gadgets. What we need to focus on are the feelings. And then if they do get to the stage when they need support, you're the obvious provider to help, because you've been on their journey all the way. So to begin with, you may not actually need to deliver much traditional care, but you're supporting them to genuinely remain independent. And then if that changes, you can step in. Now, and I think the other thing which is quite interesting is that some of our members have been experimenting with different business models, how to charge for that. And I think the ones that are having the most success have decided in the end not to have differential rates and charge differential amounts for separate services, but to incorporate it into the complete offer, and have it as the headline rate, so that it's all part of the service. In the state-funded part of the market, there are some different issues. And this will slightly depend on where you are in the country, but in general, the way that home care is commissioned and purchased is by the minute or by the hour. So the focus is on process, not on results or not on outcomes. And quite a lot of these technology solutions are really have the most potential to focus on improving outcomes. So you've got an immediate problem with that the reward system isn't geared up in the right way. And then you've also got on top of that just the sheer, the fee rates are just so low. So to give you one example, Walsall Council recently announced an increase in fee rates to £15.80 an hour. That doesn't even cover national living wage and associated on costs, never mind all of the other operating costs that you have in a care agency. So there's no margin to even think about investing, and no margin in cash and no margin in headspace, because a lot of providers as well are just firefighting, desperately trying to find care workers to meet the demand. They're getting phone calls the whole time from councils and the NHS berating them for not being able to supply services. And you've really got to have some time and space to sit back and think about this. And at the moment, a lot of them haven't. Plus, a lot of them are very small. And as I'm sure as Sue is discovering, that many don't have any experience in procuring IT. They don't know what they're looking for. They don't know what's good and what isn't. And the information that's out there isn't that great to help. And I think, Morten knows that I think this, but also the supplier side of all of these technology solutions in the great scheme of things is relatively immature. A lot of them are not that far from startup stage, trying to get funding, trying to convince investors that they've got annual recurring revenue. And when you're in that stage, it's sometimes quite hard to get customers as well, because you haven't had a chance to prove yourself. So you're kind of in this vicious circle. And, there are certain risks as a provider. So speaking from my experience in my previous role, we bought into a medicines management system, which is really good. The company involved went bust after a couple of years. We had to go back to using paper because we couldn't find another system that we thought was as good. That company got back in the saddle because they managed to get funding, and we went back to them. But a lot of others wouldn't have done, if you see what I mean. So I think sometimes providers are worried about how secure some of the companies are that they're buying into. This is where I think government could help more. You end up, and you sort of end up also with some risks that the providers, the suppliers that end up ahead of the pack initially, tend to get more customers more quickly because they can prove that they've got customers. And then that can create a semi-monopoly position. And then that gives them a lot of power to start screwing providers with contracts and payments. And then that also word gets round, and that creates concern. And then I think another factor is the government is they've legislated to make data submission compulsory, which at one level is a good thing because we need more data from social care. But at the moment, it's quite a bad thing because they haven't really thought through what data they want. All they know is that they're going to fine people if they don't provide the data. And, if you're in the NHS, there are literally armies of people employed to gather, analyse and report data. We don't have armies of people to do that kind of thing in social care. And what happens if the regulator starts snooping in your systems and all of that? So I think there's quite a lot of, I say that, I don't really mean that they shouldn't be looking, but I could understand why some providers might think, I'm safer on paper because, the Care Quality Commission isn't going to be able to see.
Who do they trust? That's who can they trust? And that's, I know we've discussed it, is almost to have a due diligence questionnaire. What are the fundamentals that care businesses should be able to say, look, I need to have these as a prerequisite in order to make the best choice for my business? That's what I think there should be.
Luckily, at the moment, with the NHS Digital Transformation Office's work to help digitalize and emphasize the work of digital within the sector, there are lots of scrutiny on the supplier side. I can vouch for that. Going there and going through that process. But what I think I wanted to say is, if you imagine the landscape of suppliers being predominantly SMEs, there are a few of the companies that were exhibiting at the Health Plus Care last week that are enterprise size, but the rest of us are SMEs, as Jane totally well described. It's small companies. If we compare ourselves with other industries, you have a Deliveroo with £1 billion of funding, a third of that coming from Amazon. And what legislation, what regulations, what guidelines do they have to live up to? What happens if a gluten-free pizza ends up with your neighbor instead of yourself? Here we're talking about not giving, or giving the Parkinson medicine to the wrong person. Or it's really odd, isn't it, that we do not see a mastodon move in this sector yet, although there are, of course, some consolidation happening on the supplier side of things. I think would definitely also influence the level and the maturity of the solutions if we were to see some bigger players move in here.
Yeah, I was going to say that, I mean, Morten also knows, because I've said this before, but another problem I find is that you know, in my previous organisation, we'd been using digital solutions in our care homes for a long time, 15 years long. And then sort of over that time, we'd created our own interconnected sort of system that was all a bit bodged, but our finance system did talk to our care delivery management system, and our inquiry system talked to our care delivery management system, and our roster talked to our payroll and things. And I wanted to move to a cloud-based mobile solution, but there wasn't really anything off the shelf that I could move to without losing some of those integrations. And I think that is still an issue, and it's because of the immaturity of the supplier side of the market, that there's really only one supplier at the moment that's attempted to piece together the back office functions, the finance and the HR and everything else, and that's where some of the real efficiencies come. And at the moment, we're sort of lacking those solutions, and we were quite late into digital in home care, not because we wanted to be late, because we'd got it in care homes, but there was literally nothing to buy until about 2014, 2015, when a couple of companies came along with apps. And even then, one of them was able to integrate our roster with the care delivery management system, and the other one wasn't. So I had a choice of one.
That's a brilliant point. Yeah, I think we sometimes forget that the supplier landscape needs to follow the demand, and of course the demand continuously develops also with the people that you're trying to assist. So what is it that you're seeing families really look into, if they're looking at all for technology, when they're looking for services for their loved ones?
I mean, Jane said it before, is peace of mind. That's what that's what families want. And it is the son or the daughter who wants peace of mind to know that, mum or dad has got up this morning. They have got up to make themselves a cup of tea. That is their concern, their real concern. And that's an easy win, as I say, for the daughter or the son to try and persuade the then parents to take on that type of technology. But it's not, it's still not openly available, and there's very few home care providers who are offering that. And I almost wonder that, you've got is it going to be, because I know that there are some local authorities who are implementing the sensors, the care alarms, and that's great. Are we going to see more of local authorities that are going down the technology route, and perhaps seeing more of the direct payments, perhaps? So you've got different types or different structures. Are they going to concentrate on the technology and let the care providers do the more caring? I don't know. I don't know what the appetite is for that.
So am I fair to say or ask are the models of care going to change going forward? Are we going to redefine what care is, what the future is, and what we mean by care going forward?
I think in the state-funded part of the market, what I said earlier is what is the thing that needs to be fixed. It's the way that care is commissioned and purchased, which is very much a barrier at the moment. And not just that, but to Sue's point, so let's say I put movement sensors in my parents' house, and I know that one of them has fallen. That's only useful if someone can go and pick them up. And in some of the local authority commission services, that does happen. But if you're a self-funder and you go and rig up your own little, system in your house, so what? Some of our members have also been experimenting with pilots looking at remote health monitoring. So, for example, they will be real-time monitoring Betty's blood pressure. So they've got reams and reams of data about Betty's blood pressure. And then they notice a deviation from normal. So they go along to the GP and say, we're worried about Betty's blood pressure. And the GP says, oh, God, don't tell me about Betty's blood pressure. I haven't got time to look at all that data. And that's true. It's not because they're lazy. It's because they are being set up to be the gatekeepers for literally everything, and they can't manage. So I think if we're going to scale this, we need to come up with some different ways of analysing the data, clever people with their algorithms and their machine learning and everything to identify deviations from normal, because you end up with absolutely tons of data with all of this stuff. But then pushing those data that show something unusual has happened to people that can do something about it there and then. Otherwise, we're just generating data and it's going into the ether and absolutely nothing is going to change.
Yeah.
That's a brilliant point. I think in general, we should be really mindful and careful not to do a one-to-one translation of what we had previously, and to think about really leapfrogging when actually making use of digital tools.
No, and even, you talk about a care need, but this is really, it's installing it prior to any care need. That's if we could try and get this preventative structure or strategy in place from government to encourage people. How do we encourage people to take on this technology within the home to stop them from needing a future care in the future? So it's a real tough one. And is there going to be any appetite from government to actually put this in place? I don't know. There should be, because it would provide a significant return on investment. But is that going to happen?
There is appetite, at least some of the local authorities that we are speaking with, and they're reaching out to us. But I think there is a lack of clarity with regards to where they want to go. They're still thinking digital as digital. They're not thinking technology digital as a problem-solving tool for this sector. So I think, a lot of education, again, back to that point, has to happen across the board.
I think another issue is that quite often in this field, you've got the people that make gizmos and gadgets and digital things, and then you've got the end user, and one doesn't always ask the other what they want. And even if you do ask them, they don't necessarily know what they want. You don't know what you don't know sometimes. And I was back in 2015, I went on a study tour to Germany, and it was really interesting because we went to the University of Düsseldorf, and they were explaining the findings of a big pan-European study that they had been organising, and it was on this very subject. So they had got research subjects in 5 or 6 EU countries. So there was, I can't remember exactly, but Spain and France and Germany and Belgium, the Netherlands, the UK. And they'd searched the internet and had found about 120 gadgets and gizmos, and they included all kinds of things, sensors to switch your oven off, robotic hoovers, pill dispensers, key fobs to open doors, security cameras, like you name it, it was on the list. And they put a lot of these different, so they surveyed, they researched with the end users and asked them what they were worried about, and that was quite interesting because there were differences between different nationalities. So people in Britain seemed most worried about personal security. The French were really interested in all of the remote health monitoring and all of their sort of health apps. And the Germans didn't want any CCTV cameras anywhere, but they were very interested in motion sensors and everything. Anyway, they gave all of these different gadgets to different people, and a couple of things really stood out for me. Number one, shouldn't really be surprising, but I suppose somehow it did seem surprising at the time. But actually, what people found really useful was very individual. And that shouldn't be a surprise to any of us in social care, because we're sort of trained to tailor, to personalise. But, for example, there was a young woman, she was only in her 30s and she was in a wheelchair. But the thing that made the most difference to her was this key fob thing that enabled her front door to open automatically. Like you can press a button and open your garage door. She could press a button and it opened her front door, which meant that she didn't have to kind of struggle being lower down in a wheelchair to get to a high key hole thing. Another lady really, really loved the robotic Hoover, but only because it gave her more time to watch YouTube videos of musical singing, and she used to sit there singing. And then the lady that was really worried about security, so she was given a tablet that enabled her to see videos of her security camera on her door, and it also enabled her to control the environment in her house, the heating and the lighting and everything. But she discovered through having a tablet Facebook, and she was then able to connect with people that she'd lost contact with years ago. And it turned out that it was that social connection thing that was what really excited them and made them feel better. All of the other stuff, back to your Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's why I wrote it down, Sue, because actually, the security thing and the being able to open your front door, that's the lower physical need thing. But once that problem is solved, then you're on to the wanting the connection and the self-actualization, and so I suppose the point I'm making is that they started off thinking that they wanted one thing, but actually they found the real value was in something else, which was moving up that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So I think it's very difficult sometimes to do the research to ask people what they want, because they don't necessarily know what they want until they experiment and find it.
Yeah. And I think, it's always absolutely it, but you've always got to make sure that it relates to the person's need and their personalised care plan. What is actually important to them, and that's why. And again, when I engage with care businesses, just looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you can actually see them that they get it, because you're focusing on the person, and they then understand that, I actually see now how this technology can enable this person to live a better life, and that, care managers get that, care business owners get that, and it's just a really easy framework to use.
I think that's a really, really good place to end this. Self-actualization, personalization, all the good words that technology can really be a carrier for, a vehicle for. Thank you both for joining us today. It was a huge pleasure. And of course, the people listening in will be a lot wiser when this is over. Take care.
Nice to see you, Sue.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, review, and share your favorite Take Care podcast with your friends and colleagues. Until we meet next week, take care.